Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's panel discussion is about the role of immigration in Florida's society and economy. This is hosted by the UCF Office of Public Policy Events. My name is Dr. Haley Winston, and I am the Director of Civil Discourse and Engagement here at UCF. I'm also the Director of the Office of Public Policy Events. I have the privilege of serving as your moderator today. This promises to be a thoughtful and engaging conversation. This event is a part of our ongoing commitment to fostering civil discourse and addressing public policy issues from multiple, diverging, and opposing perspectives. Immigration is an issue that profoundly shapes Florida, economically, socially, and culturally. From the farm fields of Central Florida to the thriving metropolitan hubs in Miami and Orlando, immigration plays a critical role in driving our state's economy and enriching our communities. At the same time, it remains a topic of vigorous debate, reflecting its complexity and far-reaching impacts. Today's discussion will follow the format of a group forum, where our panelists will explore different facets of immigration policy, engage with one another's perspectives, and answer your questions. The structure reflects our mandate to provide an open platform for diverse voices, ensuring that all viewpoints are heard and respected. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the University of Central Florida and its leadership for making these discussions possible, as well as the Board of Trustees and the Board of Governors for their support in this initiative. A special thanks also goes to our panelists who have joined us to share their expertise and their insights. Our discussion will begin with opening remarks from each panelist, followed by a moderated discussion. We will then open for questions and answers from the audience. We encourage you to engage respectfully and thoughtfully during the Q&A portion. At UCF, we believe in the power of dialogue to illuminate complex issues, find common ground, and deepen our understanding of the world around us. Let us lean into that spirit today as we explore the many dimensions of immigration in Florida. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker to introduce themselves and share their opening remarks.
Good afternoon. Hi, everybody. I know you're enjoying
your food. Please take your time. I'm just going to chat for a little bit. I'd like to introduce myself.
My name is Dr. Irene Pons. I teach in the Department of Legal Studies here at UCF, and we have an Emmy-winning award production that we produce based on immigration law. So when you take the classes in our department, we offer experiential learning that's innovative, that takes students to the border so they can experience what it's like for themselves. So as a result, we recently were featured in the UCF Today. We won 10 Emmy nominations that will be going to the Suncoast Regional Emmys in about 2 weeks on December 7th. That really talks about this issue, and the feedback in the course has been really informational, instructive, because we offer an unbiased view from an educational perspective on the border crisis, on the policies, on the legal aspects of it, and we also cover Border Patrol and what they're doing in their initiatives.
Turn it on.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon. It's hard to follow up with that. I have no Emmy nominations, but my name is Renee Gomez. I am part of the Farm Workers Association of Florida. We are a statewide organization spanning from here in Apopka, Florida, down to Homestead, Immokalee, Pearson, and Fellsmere. We are focused on farm workers, but we also help anyone that needs it. A lot of our population consists of immigrants, migrant farm workers, undocumented, immigrants and people that live below the poverty line. So we are an advocacy group that looks to advocate for, just working conditions, fair pay, fight against wage theft, and to really put into the spotlight all that farm workers do for the community. So thank you so much for having me.
And Dr. Concha, if you could introduce yourself.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Maritza Concha. Can you guys hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can.
Um, lecturer at the School of Public Administration, and I'm also former director for the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management. I've been working with the Hispanic Latino community for the last 20 years, I will say, working as an evaluator before joining UCF, and trying to collect data and collect information using participatory processes as well as culturally and linguistically approaches to make sure that their voices are heard and that information they provide will help us guide through the process of assessing the performance of their programs that they receive, but also to understand their needs and to be to help them become more inclusive in this society. As part of my work as the former director of the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management, I have led several capacity buildings for nonprofit organizations in Central Florida, with more, I think we serve about 100 nonprofits in Osceola and in Orange County, and we help them to become more equipped with knowledge on grant writing, program evaluation, strategic planning, financial management, and all of those issues will help them to expand the services that they provide to the most in need. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. Thank you for being here. So my first question today will go to Renee. So how does immigration policy impact the daily lives of Florida's farm workers, and what role does civic engagement play on amplifying their voices in policy discussions?
Thank you, Vicky, for that. Not to be too generic, right? But it affects everything. When you look at immigration policy, that it has an effect on mental health, on the economic stability, on their health. If you want to just, there's so many policies you can pick. For example, the H-2A visa. That is a visa for those that don't know. It's for agricultural workers to come here and work legally. And at face value, it looks great, right? Because the employer has to sponsor them, they have to provide housing and transportation, and they're able to work it. The problem with that was, we look into it, a lot of these H-2A workers can be easily exploited. I think it's time where in the state of Florida, we don't have a Department of Labor that looks over wage theft. So some of these H-2A workers experience a lot of wage theft. Some of the housing conditions are deplorable. You can get, I don't know, up to 20 people in a mobile home that's about, say, 600 square feet. So there's a lot of things that affect the person's well-being. Obviously, a lot of these people can't go back to their countries, can't see their families. So that has a heavy mental toll on them, the isolation. So the policies can either be very beneficial or very negative. But then when you include civic engagement, it gives a small chance to be able to become part of the community. Civic engagement at its core, I believe, is when somebody decides to become part of the community and actively participate in solving the solutions of the community's problems. However, when you have migrant farm workers here, a lot of them don't have time to go to a city council meeting. A lot of them don't have time to, let's say, volunteer for a nonprofit. So something that we can do, and that many communities can do, is take away the barriers. Make sure you make it as accessible as possible. Go to them, educate them on the electoral process, whether they can vote or not. They still have a voice. Everyone in this country still has rights, whether you're documented or not. So with civic engagement, through education, people can definitely become more part of the community and help shape the solutions that they want to see.
That's great. I do have a follow-up. Do you have anything specifically that you would say to policymakers that they could do to help amplify those voices and help farm workers know about their rights?
That's difficult because I mean, you have programs now like OSHA. You have different
departments that come in and they do try to educate farmers on what they can do. The issue with that is
they
they
limit
limit
it
it
here,
here,
right? So if
so
they
if they
want to
want
complain about their working conditions, if
conditions,
they
if
want
they
to
want to
complain
complain
against
against
discrimination,
discrimination,
they're in
they're
fear that if they have a visa, they're going to lose it. And if they don't have a job, how can they support their family here or back in their home country? So I think, yeah, if we can get more local support, I think that's where we can make the biggest difference. To have some kind of, I mean, you see it in other countries across the world. There's immigration, like integration programs, where they set aside a department or funds that helps them learn the language, helps them learn the culture, helps them get integrated. So if we could do that at the local level, that would make a world of difference.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Going to move on to some questions for Dr. Pons. So, from a legal perspective, what are the most pressing challenges in immigration law that affect Florida, and how do state policies interact with or diverge from federal immigration laws?
So in
So
Florida,
Florida, we are in a very unique state. We do have immigrants from Haiti, Central America, the Dominican Republic.
And so
And so some of the challenges that we've
seen with the
seen with the
legislation
legislation
that
that
was
was
passed
passed
last
last
year
year
is
is
some
there was
conflicts
some
between
conflict
state
between
and
state
federal
and
laws.
federal laws.
For
For
example, they
example, they
implemented
implemented the use of
E-Verify to be able to
E-Verify
check
to be able to check
for people's
for people's
identification, and
identification,
then
and
local
then local
governments
governments
enacting
enacting
policies against
policies
sanctuary
against
cities.
cities.
So
So
obviously
obviously
there is
there
a
is a
conflict
conflict
between
between
policies,
policies,
government,
government,
local
local
law
law
enforcement,
enforcement.
and under a
Under
federal
federal
perspective, for
perspective,
the most part, the federal
federal
law
law
delegates
delegates
immigration,
immigration,
customs, and
customs, and
enforcement.
enforcement.
So as
That's
what we
what
know
we
as
know as
ICE,
ICE
to be
to
able
be
to
able to
enforce some
enforce
of
some of
these
these
laws. So
laws.
they are
They
here
are here
locally on
locally
that
on that
level
level
trying to enforce
enforce
them.
them.
And
And
so
so
in one way, it has really reduced migration and immigration because people are no longer seeking Florida as a state where they want to come to work because it's more difficult for them to do so illegally. We do have programs for legal visas and things of that nature through employers, but it's really cracked down on that illegal immigration aspect of it because people are scared or in fear and no longer want to make Florida their home. So that's kind of what we've seen, that there's those conflicts and those enactments of those laws, could have impacts mostly for the immigrant communities that are working undocumented.
Yeah, so my follow-up question about that is how can either policymakers or our local community or even our students, what can they do to help address the barriers that you're seeing?
I think the biggest part of it is misinformation, right? If you haven't been to the border, please take one of our courses so you can see what it's really like and make informed decisions. So as future attorneys or criminal justice students or even journalism students, we have an ethical duty to tell stories, and those stories need to be told from a realistic perspective and telling the truth based on what we see. And so once you can be informed and educate others, you can kind of help with whatever is happening, right, wrong, and different, and figure it out as opposed to believing everything you see on the media, kind of doing your own educational investigation into what's happening.
So if a student wanted to find your courses, how would they find it?
So it's a PLA 4843, it's immigration law. If you are not a legal studies major, you can take that course as part of one of your electives. We would love to have you. It's usually an online course, it's super immersive, and then we do offer that alternative spring break opportunity to travel with me to the border.
I feel like everyone's going to be signing up, right? I want to sign up. Okay, so Dr. Concha, I have a question for you now. Based on your expertise in public administration and nonprofit management, what role do nonprofit organizations play in supporting immigrant communities in Florida, particularly in the areas like education, housing, and advocacy?
Sure. So nonprofit organizations, what they do is that they provide services to the general community on specifically on services and programs that the government may not be able to assist or help, regardless of their legal status, right? So There are different types of organizations coming from organizations that provide domestic violence prevention services to emergency management, to education, housing. And some of those organizations, what they do is that they provide specific services targeting all communities that need, but also to use culturally responsive practices to be able to increase accesses to those services. And I have a couple of examples on that. So for instance, for domestic violence prevention, here in Central Florida, we have Nuevo Sendero, which is a nonprofit that provides assistance of survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, full in Spanish, right? Then we have Mujer in South Florida, in the area of Homestead, that provides domestic violence and sexual assault prevention services to survivors that are farm workers, mostly farm workers in that area. And so other agencies that I have also worked before, it's that provide education services, specifically after school programs from cradle to career services, in which kids are enrolled into an after school program in collaboration with enrichment activities and also therapy to break that cycle of poverty. And so they receive services since they are very little, like age 5 or 4, and they are follow up throughout high school with the idea that these kids will get all the information and the resources they need, along with their parents, to be able to continue growing and perhaps going into post-secondary education, getting into a college and that kind of stuff. And that sort of like, helps them to break the cycle of poverty, but also the cycle of domestic violence as well. Other things that I've been involved that I've seen how nonprofits have helped the community is a recent project that I'm working on with the farm workers population, actually, in different areas in Central Florida. That includes Immaculate Foundation, or the Immaculate area, Mayaca, and also Apodka, in which I've been doing a series of focus groups to assess what are some of the concepts or the knowledge of farm workers when it comes to disaster preparedness, but also on disaster recovery. One of the biggest things that I notice is that farm workers are a very vulnerable population, and they may not have the necessary resources to be able to recover after a storm, right after a hurricane, and they ended up having already problems with their the way that they live, right? But then when the hurricane comes, then the same thing happens. They have holes in the ceilings on their houses, and just continuing way of suffering that will lead into different aspects that could damage their probability to fully recover or not recover at all. So part of that project, we created a comic book called in Spanish and English, and the Spanish version is called Ya te informaste, which is have you prepared, right? And we told the stories along with the assistant of a community advisory board that helped us analyze the focus groups we did during the summer with the farm workers, and we created these 2 different stories on comic books to help them increase awareness about the different struggles they go through and who to talk to and what to do after a hurricane. So those are just ideas on how the nonprofits, in collaboration with researchers and other folks in the community, using community action, participatory research, and participatory processes, and how can we shed light into this type of vulnerabilities and the way that to kind of like diminish their suffering, right? And make sure that we give them a voice and a voice to be heard.
Oh, that's such a creative way of like actually reaching out and working with community and finding what they need and how to reach them. I love that. Well, I'd also like to know, given your expertise and experience in evaluating nonprofit programs that serve immigrants and other at-risk populations, what are the key elements of successful service partnerships, and how can these partnerships be leveraged to address the unique challenges faced by Florida's immigrant communities?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I actually did my dissertation almost like a decade and a half ago, on service partnership and evaluating service partnerships. So I'm very, very committed and passionate about this topic. One of the things I notice is that working with service partnerships is that nonprofits and what it constitutes a service partnership to begin with, right? So it's not only composed by different members or different nonprofit organizations, but it also calls on the participation of the community, researchers, the private sector, the faith-based communities, all of them working together for accomplishing one particular goal or objective. So there has to be some sort of like a common mission across them and a common outcome as well, and what they want to achieve and how they're going to get there. The other thing is to have a very skillful facilitator, because they come from different angles, and then you may have someone from the legal department and someone from the disaster preparedness and human health services, right? Depending on what kind of holistic service you want to provide. And one of the issues we always run into is that everybody want to speak, and everybody wants to put their their point of view, which is great, but we're not here to kind of like address the problem in one angle. We're here to address the problem in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary way, right? Different angles. And so a skillful facilitator is one of the things that I have noticed as an evaluator that plays a vital role. Another thing is the ability to trust each other. You have to put your ego aside, not to be in the sense of competing against each other, but rather collaborating, and how that through collaboration will look like through cooperation, and also a vertical, a horizontal, not vertical communication, right? Shared decision making is another way that I notice is I guess, a determinant of a successful service partnership. And how that plays is very interesting, because I've been in situations in which I was part of a service partnership, and the fact that the funder may require participation from community members, and the fact that they only sitting in the table, but just to be part of an attendance sheet and not giving them space to talk. And if you're giving them a space to talk, what are you doing with that information to be able to incorporate their inputs into something like a product, an action plan, right? So it's not only having them because they look pretty sitting there in the community, right? But also to be able to acknowledge what they can do, how they can get there, and what they have to bring into the table. And that includes not only community members that are adults, but it's very important to involve the youth. The youth come up with the most creative and amazing ways to solve a problem. And we should most of the time learn from them and see how their creativity involves. And I think I cover everything in terms of trust and reduce that type of competition, make sure that you communicate horizontal, not vertically. And yeah, those are some of the determinants of having a successful service partners from the evaluation perspective.
That's so interesting. Trust is so important to everything we do. And I love that you bring that up today. So my next question is for all panelists. And so whoever wants to start can just jump in on answering. But this one's about economic impact. So how does Florida's reliance on immigration labor in industries like agriculture, hospitality, construction shape its economy? And what are the potential consequences for restrictive immigration policies?
So immigrant labor has been historically the cornerstone of Florida's economy. And so immigrants make up a significant percentage of the workforce, including tomatoes, citrus, and crops, as well as our hospitality industry and our construction industry. So on those levels, immigration impacts our state tremendously, and we see some of that when different policies are implemented. You either see mass exodus, you see arrests, but that doesn't stop legal migration. So, the other aspect of it is that although you see all the terrible things in the news, we do still have many people that are coming here legally, applying for visas through their employers, their jobs, through marriage. So that's the other aspect that is not as highlighted under the news, but it does have an impact because our immigrant workers do fill very vital roles that are important to the economy.
Yeah,
And just to add to that,
as
as
she
she mentioned,
the
hospitality sector alone, right, it's estimated that about 10% are undocumented immigrants that work in that sector. 33%. You look into agriculture construction, the number rises to about 50%. So when you see that amount of people in the state of Florida, not only are they working in these sectors, but they're also contributing to sales tax. Right? A lot of these people also pay taxes through ITIN numbers. So if these are certain policies we put in place, not only will these sectors take a huge hit, right, for local communities, the state will see billions of dollars in revenue lost because many of these communities would have to go somewhere else where they'd be able to work.
Yes, and I want to add a couple of things on that. Sometimes when the interview, the focus groups, during the focus groups dialogues that I have during the summer, I noticed that some of the farm workers were telling me that the farm workers or some of them come from Mexico directly to here, and they're seasonal farm workers, and so that leave people that live here out of work as well. So because they come from different parts of Central America, they do their job and then they go back to the country of origin. And so sometimes the ones that are here, that even though they are working towards helping the economy here in Florida, but they're also in terms of not getting what they deserve in terms of decent hourly rates, and so that's some of the things that affect them directly, even though they have a very strong role in the economy.
So one of the things you all were talking about earlier is social integration. So what strategies can communities and institutions implement to better support the integration of immigrant population into Florida's social and cultural fabric?
I know
I touched on that briefly in the first question. But something that community members can do, you don't have to be an expert in any field. We all have skills that we could help our communities in. So if you're somebody who's a native English speaker, right, and you want to help people integrate into this community, there's always nonprofits, there's always places looking for English tutors. Here at the Farmer Association, just yesterday, I was helping a kid out of college. Right? Their parents came from Mexico, they worked with FAFSA, how to apply. I didn't study that, I went to college, but I myself an expert in that. But any skill that you may have, any time you may have, volunteer time is essential to help families and children be integrated. And then once you do that, you're able to get to know their stories. You're able to get to know how they came here, what are some of the daily struggles they're dealing with. And I think once we build emotional connection with the community, it's no longer, oh, it's supposed to be that now those are family members, those are friends, those are loved ones, because we know what they've been through, we've seen the struggle in their eyes. So I think that makes it much more, makes it harder for us to ignore the problem, and it makes us much more willing.
For me, my favorite aspect of all this is community engagement. So when I'm able to go out to different festivals, to go to different communities, churches, and kind of meet people where they are, that helps. One, I become more educated about what their needs are in the community and what their story is. And two, I see the differences from a political and legal perspective on how the laws that are created impact those communities and what we can do from, an educational standpoint. So I feel like that's one of our biggest fortes, is that community engagement. If you can go to festivals, if you can foster just a dialogue, if you are from different countries. I mean, we also have immigrants even at our school that are Haitian, Dominican. I mean, we are a Hispanic serving institution. So 21% of our student population, they could be in your classrooms. And it's as easy as maybe having a conversation with somebody that's culturally from another country or speaks another language within your classes, and start there. I mean, that's the impact from our educational perspective, to see, what different student organizations on campus are doing, what Latinx is doing, what the LGBTQ students are doing, to have more understanding of other cultures.
And I wanted to briefly mention about acculturation and the way that looks like. So when we talk about acculturation, is the assimilation of dominant culture, right? And so how, to what extent we assimilate the American culture as immigrants. And I include myself, I'm from Peru, Lima, Peru. And so there are different ways of doing that. And I noticed that based on my research studies, when we talk about acculturation, it doesn't matter how many years you have in the States, there's so many things that we're still kind of like retain from our own culture, right? And that could come in different ways of having our parents or our, seniors or grandparents trying to keep the language of origin, right, or how they were raised, and then they may try to speak a little bit of English, but they may, not succeed as well as their younger generations. So there's a lot of patience that we need to always, and then that's something that I said to my students, try to be patient with your grandparents, try to be patient with folks that have limited English proficiency, because that's kind of like a limitation or a barrier for them to be fully integrated into this community. And so instead of kind of like growing apart, we have to put into consideration what actually unite us and what are some of the strengths and the things that we can all work together as a community.
Thank you all. I love your answers. It's really reminded me of the time of year we're at, where our next holiday coming up is Thanksgiving, right? And Thanksgiving being a holiday where we celebrate what we're thankful for and bring other people around the table. And we've had so many Thanksgivings here this year, and bringing everyone together over a meal is a great way to learn about each other. So my next question is for each of you. If you could propose one change to immigration policy that would benefit Florida's economy and society, what would it be, and tell us why?
I guess
Yes,
for
for
me
me
personally,
personally, this program has been in question in recent years, but legalizing DACA back in 2008, there was also the DAPA program for their parents. When you see the benefits that come out, children that have been raised their whole lives here in the United States, in Florida, they don't know anything else. They get the opportunity to work, to study, and to be able to get local wages. The research has been established how much they contribute to tax dollars, with billions contribute across the last decade. It was implemented in 2012. So I would definitely, if we were to legalize that, the millions of diagnoses there are now, and being able to register more in a few years, I think that would benefit Florida's economy. It would also bring in rich culture from Native Americans.
I guess in an ideal world, it'd be great to have our state kind of lead the rest of the country on what an immigrant workforce would look like, and maybe a pilot program where we get qualified immigrant workers that want to come here, and that way the state can benefit from the tax dollars that would be made from having the workforce that's already here, or bringing talented or skilled workers to the country, allowing businesses like agriculture, hospitality, and construction to maybe temporarily sponsor some of those workers, so that way we are benefiting overall, and everyone. It would be a win-win to have some sort of pilot program.
And then for me to promote more programs related to the Dreamers, I think that there is a lot of students who are finishing high school that may not have the legal documentation to be able to apply for a university. And it's just really makes me really sad that they're very competent, they're very smart, bright, and they can provide so much in this country, and so they can just be such a asset to our community. And the fact that they may be asked to go back to their countries, it's really something that I will definitely support, to continue having the Dreamers Act active.
Well, thank you all. I have one last question, and then we'll take it to the audience and see if they have any questions. But my next question is asking you to look ahead in the future. So as Florida continues to grow as a destination for immigrants, what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities over the next decade, both for the state and for our community level?
With the Farm Workers Association,
We also have a focus on climate justice. So definitely climate change would be something for our members that work out in the fields. They just passed a law last year where non-local governments are not able to implement any kind of heat stress protection, whether it be putting shades, putting water close by, having bathrooms. It's just going to get hotter, it's just going to get warmer, and people are going to be suffering from that. So I think that's a challenge that we're going to have to. We're not going to be able to change the climate next year, but we can implement policies that will protect our workers, not just immigrants, but also citizens here. And then in terms of opportunity, when you see immigrants, typically their countries a lot of entrepreneurs. So when you get here, there's a statistic about 30% of entrepreneurs currently in the country are here. So as years progress and we get influx of immigrants, I mean, there'll be more businesses, there'll be more job opportunities. So I believe that's something that Florida definitely leverage to help its economy.
I'm going to talk about the other side of the perspective. So having immigrants is going to, one, put more of a strain on housing and infrastructure. So that's something looking forward as to where are we going to put everybody. We barely have enough housing for the people that live here, and how are we going to house more immigrants? And do we have some sort of plan for the growth of infrastructure? Climate change is obviously one of those things as well, because it disproportionately impacts immigrant communities. We saw it over in Tampa. Many migrants were living in mobile homes and trailers during the hurricanes. They lost everything. They don't have the opportunities or finances to afford insurance for their properties, so many of them are now left homeless, and we're all scrambling as nonprofits in the community, I've heard, trying to find housing for all of these families that are left without anywhere to live. And finally, obviously, politics plays a role in everything that we do in education. We teach about it, and there's two sides to every story. And immigration is now more relevant than it was before. So kind of continuing to monitor everything from an educational perspective for us as UCF is important to kind of see how everything is going. What is Border Patrol doing? What is the government doing? What is the local and the state government? And figuring out what some of those uncertainties are going to be. At this point, we don't know what's going to happen, but we look forward to providing a really great perspective for our students to make informed decisions from an unbiased approach.
And I guess for me, it's the potential mass deportation as a big challenge in the state of Florida and around the states, I guess, and also the separation of families, all of that. And the ways that we can, opportunities that could be identified is that we can definitely help as researchers, our students here at UCF, we can help to document their stories, to help to document the lived experiences, perhaps creating a course or maybe a certificate on community engaged research to train students on how to properly do community action participatory research, have that community advisory to help them, guide them through the process on how to properly design evaluation questions and how to work with the community, how to co-analyze the findings and collect data together, and then create research products to increase awareness and continue being advocates for change and for supporting our immigrant communities.
Thank you all. I would love to hear any questions from the audience. Come on up. Come on up. Yeah. That way we can hear you on the mic. So come on up here.
Hi guys. My question is, you guys were talking about healthcare and immigrants, and so we had Kamala versus Trump, and I was thinking hold on, I wrote the question down. How are healthcare providers in Florida affected by the new laws requiring hospitals to collect immigration status data? That's my question.
Thank you. Do you need me to restate, or are you good? Yeah, I can. So the question was specifically, how are healthcare workers impacted by the new law requiring healthcare hospitals to collect immigration status from people that are seeking treatment?
So I don't have any personal knowledge specifically of the healthcare's, I haven't spoken to hospital workers. I can tell you what happened when that was implemented is there was a very big scare in the immigrant community, and they were fearful that providing the information would cause them to be deported. And so that's kind of more of the educational perspective we provided is that, from the immigrant perspective, they were saying, I'm not going to go to the hospital if I have a toothache or if I have a heart attack or if something happens for fear that if I have to give my information, they're going to call ICE on me and ship me out of this country. I keep tabs on the news and the media. I haven't seen anything that dictates that it's having any negative impacts other than the immigrants that we've spoken to just saying, hey, I'm still scared to go. And we just encourage them, hey, you need to go. You need health care. We don't want you to lose your baby, or we don't want you to have blood loss or not discover cancer for fear that this is going to happen. And so far, I haven't seen any news, no arrests or anything like that in Florida that's having an impact in that regard.
Just to add, that's a great question. Thank you for the healthcare oversight. I haven't heard of anything or done enough research organizationally or personally, but to go off what a colleague was saying, I believe the original intent behind that, I think it was in the 1718 law that was implemented, where hospitals had to ask, was to see the economic impact that immigrants and undocumented immigrants have on the healthcare system. When you look at the dashboard, when the state published the results, statewide and in Orange County, documented immigrants only made up, if 1% of the patients admitted, and about 1.5% of the economic cost for healthcare. So, kind of disproving what the narrative was, that there's going to be huge economic influx or barrier, on the healthcare cost. But I will do more research and see if I can answer that in the future. That was a great question.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything about that, but I think the role of nonprofits here play a vital role, because they will come up with strategies if that ever happens, which I doubt. Is that they will come up with mobile mammograms, buses, or community health clinics that will help increase access to health-related services. And one of the biggest issues, as it was mentioned before, is that they just don't want to request or seek for services that are governmental services or even nonprofit support services, because they feel that they're going to get deported, or this is going to be count towards against them if they are in the legal path of becoming, residents or citizens.
Thank you all for joining us today and for the insightful discussion on the role of immigration in Florida society and economy. I'm going to ask one more time for the panelists if there's anything we didn't ask you about that you think that we need to know. If you have any closing remarks, you can give those to us at this time.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It's always wonderful to be able to educate and to provide information about topics that are relevant. And I appreciate UCF for hosting these really informative sessions. I think it's an opportunity and a forum that needs to continue to happen so that we can have dialogue and discourse on varying aspects of these issues.
Farm Association, definitely thanks UCF for inviting us and being able to be part of this discussion. We invite you to please get involved, whether it be with us or with any other nonprofit doing the work. Get involved, get to those stories, see how you can contribute, because we all have roles and skills that we can implement. And thank you so much.
And I would like to thank everyone for attending and thank you for inviting me. And one of the things that I want to share is that I teach program evaluation class for undergrad and grad students. If you're interested in evaluating social services programs, you can always enroll into my class. And we also offer a undergraduate and graduate degree in nonprofit management. If that is something that you're interested in doing, our graduate program in nonprofit management ranks number 15 in the United States. So it's a very well-recognized program. And I'm here to answer any questions. I also teach research methods in which I use a lot of community-engaged research methodology, the use of photo voice, and even the use of AI as well when we want to disseminate the findings through storytelling. So if you guys are interested in that, you can always reach out to me.
Well, thank you all again. We've had the privilege of hearing from these distinguished panelists, so let's give them all a round of applause. We truly thank you for your thoughtful insights as we explored the economic contributions of immigrant labor and the social integration of immigrant populations and the policy reforms necessary to ensure a brighter, more inclusive future for Florida. We've also addressed some of the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead of us as our state continues to grow and evolve as a hub for immigrant communities. Conversations like this remind us that immigration is not just a policy issue, it's a human issue, and one that touches on every aspect of our lives, from the food that we eat in our communities and the communities that we choose to build. Discussions like this are complex and deeply personal topics that require a willingness to engage with perspectives that are different from our own. By doing so, we not only deepen our understanding, but also strengthen the bounds that hold our communities together. On behalf of UCF's Office of Public Policy Events, I want to thank our panelists again for their expertise and our audience for your thoughtful participation and our team for organizing today's event. We encourage you to stay connected with us for future discussions like this. We host them every semester. For more information and recordings of our events, please visit our website, which is posted here. And thank you for being here today. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.